do you see differences between men and women in the way that they deal with conflict or engage in conflict?
Yeah, so the, yes.
That's the loaded question this
Yeah.
all room wants to hear.
You guys are signed up to be here for 4 hours, right? 'Cause that's so I do talk a lot to like women's affinity groups or women's networks inside organizations, and this is just an incredibly important topic. I was so happy to hear about what you're doing at your organization, because I think it's just raising awareness about what's happening around gender bias, around gender discrimination is incredibly important. When it comes to conflict, there's this assumption that women are naturally conflict avoiders, right? So I talk in the book about conflict avoiders and conflict seekers. And just based on those terms, I think you can understand what's what. I'm curious in this room how many people would say they're a conflict avoider. You can just raise your hand. All right. And how many would say they're a conflict seeker? How many would say they're both? All right. So we had a few, it looks like we had a few more conflict avoiders, but not a lot more. And the reality is that the research shows that women aren't naturally more conflict avoidant. There's nothing in our DNA that makes us less conflict avoidant. It's a learned skill, because what happens when women negotiate is they are penalized. So there's some great research out of Harvard Kennedy School. Hannah Riley Bowles has done a bunch of empirical studies that show that when women negotiate, this is all around negotiating salaries, when women negotiate their salaries, men and women who are on the other side of the negotiation are more likely to report that they do not want to work with her. Then if a man negotiates a salary, the men and women who have interviewed or been on the other side of the negotiation are more likely to want to work with him. So it's not that women don't know how to negotiate, it's not that we don't have the skills or the natural inclination, it's that we've learned that if we do, we are penalized for doing so. So we've actually, you should give yourself a pat on the back for not setting yourself up for failure, right? Rather than we do a lot of beating women up for, oh, you should negotiate more, you should stand up for yourself more. But we know what happens to women in organizations when they do that. This is some of the most depressing research I talk about. I feel like, I'm like, congratulations, here's this horrible situation you can't do anything about. But the reality is, and what Hannah Riley Bowles, another woman, Debbie Kolb at Babson advise, one of the really great tactics they advise is that women are not penalized. They are far less penalized if they negotiate on behalf of others. So the classic example is Sheryl Sandberg, when she was negotiating her salary with Mark Zuckerberg, did not go in and say, I need, $100,000 more because that's what I'm worth, which would have really worked for a man. She went in and said, as your COO, you want me to be a good negotiator. So I'm going to show you right now how good of a negotiator I am, right? So she said, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this on behalf of Facebook. I'm not doing this for myself. Now, that's exhausting mental gymnastics to have to do, right? But it's what we have to do, unfortunately. Again, knowing what we can control and knowing what we don't. It is, anytime you can negotiate on behalf of your team, anytime you can say you're doing something for your boss instead of yourself, anytime you can position it as what you have the interests of the organization. I recently was negotiating a speaking engagement, and the figure that they gave me was really low, and I said, I just don't think HBR will allow me to do that. Now, HBR will allow me to do whatever I want within reason, but it was an appropriate way to say, it's just that if I had said I can't do that as a woman, that was a real risk. But to position it as something else that someone else had put up a role, sort of a rule, then it was much more effective.
And it gets it out of this way or my way, because it's not a take it or leave it scenario.